Let me read to you a passage from the Gospel of St. Mark, chapter 10, verse 35 to 45. It's the Gospel for the 29th Sunday of Ordinary Time, Year B. St. Mark writes, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to Jesus and said to him, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you. He replied, What do you wish me to do for you? They answered him, Grant that in your glory we may sit one at your right and the other at your left. Jesus said to them, You do not know what you're asking. Can you drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized? They said to him, We can. Jesus said to them, The cup that I drink you will drink, and with the baptism with which I am baptized you will be baptized. But to sit at my right or at my left is not mine to give, but is for those for whom it has been prepared. When the 10 heard this, they became indignant at James and John. Jesus summoned them and said to them, You know that those who are recognized as rulers over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones make their authority over them felt. But it shall not be so among you. Rather, whoever wishes to be great among you will be your servant. Whoever wishes to be first among you will be the slave of all. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. That's from Mark chapter 10, verse 35 to 45, for the 29th Sunday in Ordinary Time, Year B. What does it suggest to us? Well, let me begin this way. It is recognized that Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle were the greatest of the ancient philosophers, and in effect the founders of the Western philosophical tradition. While Plato outstripped Aristotle in his influence on Christian thought in the first millennium, once Aristotle's works were obtained in the medieval West, and so brilliantly commented on by Aquinas and his disciples, his influence surpassed that of Plato. Aristotle, who lived from 384 BC to 322 BC, whose extant writings in such areas as metaphysics and ethics command great attention to this day, had a varied life. Eventually he was invited by Philip II of Macedon to become the tutor to his son Alexander the Great, in 343 BC. He tutored with Alexander the other noble youths of Macedon. Appointed as the head of the Royal Academy of Macedon, he gave lessons not only to Alexander, but also to 2 other future kings, Ptolemy and Cassander, from 335 to 323 BC. Aristotle was in Athens for a period, and upon Alexander's premature death, anti-Macedonian sentiment in Athens once again fled, and Aristotle, who was a Macedonian, was denounced for not holding the gods in honor. Certainly, and despite the place of the prime mover in Aristotle's system, certainly the divine does not get much of a look in within the rest of Aristotle's system. Aristotle fled the city to his mother's family estate in Chalcis, explaining, I will not allow the Athenians to sin twice against philosophy, a reference to Athens's trial, sentence, and execution of Socrates by imposed suicide some 2 generations before. Aristotle died in Euboea of natural causes within the year in 322 BC. What I would suggest is to be noticed is the great philosopher's perfectly normal and common attitude to death. It must be avoided, if possible. There was a threat to his life coming from the centres of influence in Athens, so he fled, a perfectly healthy response in view of the unjust charge. The notion of accepting death, unjustly imposed for some higher purpose for mankind, would not, I am sure, have entered the brilliant mind of the one whom Aquinas and the ages have called the philosopher. I suspect that he would have looked on such a notion of death as grandiose, and with a disdain similar to his well-known contempt for Alexander the Great's pretense of divinity. Here, though, I present Aristotle's flight from an unjust threat to life as emblematic of all men. It is what we would expect and recommend, but it also helps to show the originality of Jesus Christ. What do I mean? Whoever heard of having a mission, the mission to die, as a mission? Aristotle's famous pupil, Alexander, set forth with Aristotle's encouragement to conquer the Persians. That was his mission, not of course to die, but to put to death anyone who stood in his way. And this he did very successfully. Nothing could stop him, except finally his own exhausted soldiers who refused to go further into Asia. All this is to be expected. The aim was to live victoriously and certainly not to die. But what we have in the all-holy person of Jesus Christ, a person with a human intelligence and power, which because of his own divinity transcended far all before and after him, is one whose mission was precisely to drink the cup of death. Aristotle could see that there was nothing divine about Alexander, but those closest to Jesus Christ came to see that he was indeed and literally divine, and he himself claimed and proved the fact. But he declared to those who believed in him that his mission in life was to die. To say the least, this was original in one who had to be taken and was taken with the utmost seriousness, even by his enemies. He increasingly explained, and with the utmost clarity, to his uncomprehending disciples, that he had the cup of death to drink. All of this brings us to the gospel I read earlier, from Mark chapter 10, verse 35 to 45, in which Christ asks two of his closest disciples if they could drink his cup. "What do you wish me to do for you?" They answered him, "Grant that in your glory we may sit one at your right and the other at your left." Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Can you drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" They said to him, "We can." Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink, you will drink, and with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized." So there we have it. Christ had to be baptized in death. His mission was to drink this cup. It is one of the most distinctive things about the Christian religion that the incarnate Son of God came among us to die for mankind. Islam cannot swallow the thought of the all-holy prophet Jesus having to die on the cross, but such was the fact, such was the plan of God, such was the prophecy. Thus the world would be redeemed and brought to God. The highest point in human living is union with Jesus Christ precisely in his sufferings. It is by choosing the cross with Christ, whatever this means in practice for the person who does this, that one will be able to share in his resurrection. Christ chose death as the supreme moment of bearing witness to divine truth, and he invites us to follow in his footsteps. As Aquinas says, Christ suffered for us as a remedy against sin and as an example of what we ought to do. It is from the cross that he gives the supreme example of all the virtues: charity, patience, humility, obedience, contempt for earthly things, as in his commentary on the Apostles' Creed, Article 4. Let us pray for a deep appreciation of the centrality of Christ's cross in human history, of its supreme importance for the salvation of mankind, and of how Christ has transformed death from being a total negative to a wondrous and luminous gate to glory and to life, but all in union with him.